There's something deeply unsettling about emergency calls because when someone dials 911, it usually means something has already gone wrong, something serious enough that they need immediate help. And most of the time, those calls are exactly what you would expect: accidents, break ins, medical emergencies, situations where the danger is clear and visible. But sometimes the calls don't make sense. Sometimes the person on the other end isn't just asking for help. They're trying to explain something they don't understand themselves, something happening in real time that shouldn't be possible. And that's what makes certain calls so disturbing. Because you're not just hearing fear, you're hearing confusion, hesitation, and the slow realization that something is very, very wrong. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 true horror stories based on 911 calls, situations where people reached out for help but ended up describing things that still don't have a clear explanation. And these aren't just quick moments of panic. These are the kind of calls that stay with operators long after they end. The first story comes from a woman who called 911 late at night. Her voice calm at first, almost too calm, as she explained that she thought someone was inside her house. The operator asked her to confirm if she was alone, and she said yes, that she lived by herself. But she kept hearing footsteps upstairs. At first, she thought it might be the house settling, maybe just normal sounds, but then she heard something that made her certain it wasn't that. The footsteps weren't random. They had a pattern. Slow, measured, moving from one room to another. The operator told her to stay on the line and asked if she could safely leave the house, but the woman hesitated. She said she was in the kitchen, and the only way out was past the staircase, the same place where she could hear the footsteps coming from. There was a brief pause as the operator tried to reassure her, telling her to stay calm, to listen carefully, to let them know if anything changed. For a few seconds, everything was quiet. Then, the woman spoke again, her voice lower now. She said the footsteps had stopped. The operator asked where she last heard them, and she replied, right above her. The silence that followed felt heavier, even through the call. Then the operator heard it too. A faint sound in the background. A soft creak, like a floorboard shifting under weight. The operator immediately told her to get out of the house if she could, to move as quickly and quietly as possible, but the woman didn't respond right away. Instead, she whispered something. She said, "It's not upstairs anymore." The operator's tone changed instantly, asking her where the sound was now, but before she could answer, there was a noise. Loud, sudden, something falling or hitting the ground. The woman gasped, her breathing becoming uneven as she spoke again, her voice shaking now. She said she could hear it. In the hallway, between her and the door. The operator told her to stay hidden, to lock herself in a room if possible. But the woman said there was nowhere to go, that the kitchen didn't have a lock, that she could see part of the hallway from where she was standing. There was another pause, longer this time, as if she was listening carefully, trying not to make a sound. Then she spoke again, barely above a whisper. She said, "I think it sees me." The operator immediately tried to keep her focused, asking her to describe what she could see, but the woman didn't answer directly. Instead, her breathing grew heavier, faster, and then she said something that made the entire situation feel wrong. She said, "It's just standing there." The operator asked what she meant, who was standing there. But the woman didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke again, her voice had changed completely. It was quieter, slower, like she was trying to process something she didn't understand. She said, "It looks like me." For a moment, there was only silence on the line. Then the operator heard a faint sound, not from the background, from the phone itself. A second voice, soft, almost identical, repeating the same words at the same time. The operator called her name multiple times, trying to get a response, but the line suddenly went quiet, completely silent. No movement, no breathing, nothing. Officers were dispatched immediately, arriving within minutes. But when they entered the house, they found it empty. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle. No one inside. The phone was found on the kitchen floor, still connected to the call. But the woman was gone. No trace of her was ever found. And to this day, what makes that call so disturbing isn't just that she disappeared. It's what the operator reported hearing in those final seconds. Because according to them, just before the line went completely dead, both voices spoke one last time, perfectly in sync, as if there had never been just one person in that house to begin with. The second story comes from a 911 operator who handled a call that at first seemed like a routine disturbance. The kind of situation where someone hears something outside their home and wants to make sure everything is safe, but within seconds, it turned into something far more unsettling. The call came in just after 1 a.m., and the caller, a man in his early 30s, sounded alert but controlled as he told the operator that someone was outside his house. He said he had been sitting in his living room when he heard something moving around his backyard. Slow footsteps on gravel, stopping and starting in a way that didn't feel random. The operator asked if he could see anyone, and the man said no, that it was too dark, but he was sure someone was there. At first, it sounded like a possible trespassing situation, and the operator told him to stay inside, lock all doors and windows, and avoid confrontation. The man confirmed that everything was locked, that he was safe inside, and for a moment, the situation seemed under control. But then something changed. The man went quiet mid-sentence, as if he had just noticed something. The operator called his name, asking what happened, and after a few seconds, he responded. His voice lower now, more tense. He said the footsteps had stopped, completely. The operator asked where he last heard them, and the man replied, right outside his back door. A brief silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable, before the man spoke again, quieter this time. He said, "There's something on the door." The operator immediately asked him to move away from that area, to keep distance. But the man didn't move right away. Instead, he described what he was seeing. He said there was a shadow, not moving, just standing there, visible through the glass panel of the back door. The operator asked if he could make out any details, any features, but the man hesitated before answering. He said, "It's too dark to see clearly, but it's not facing the door." The operator paused for a moment, confused, asking him to explain, and the man responded in a way that made the situation feel wrong instantly. He said, "It's standing there, but it's facing away from me." A cold silence filled the call for a few seconds. Then, without warning, there was a sound, A soft tap from the door. The man flinched audibly, his breathing becoming sharper as the tapping came again, slow, even, deliberate. The operator told him to get to another room, to stay out of sight, but the man still didn't move. Instead, he kept watching, listening. The tapping stopped suddenly, replaced by silence. And then, the man spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. He said, "It's turning." The operator immediately told him to leave the room, but before he could respond, there was a louder noise, a sudden impact against the door. The man shouted, stumbling backward as the sound echoed through the house. The operator tried to keep him focused, asking if the door was holding, if he could get somewhere safe, but the man didn't answer directly. Instead, his voice changed. Confused, uncertain. He said, "It's gone." The operator asked what he meant, and the man said the shadow wasn't there anymore, that the space outside the door was empty. The operator told him not to approach, to stay where he was. But the man hesitated, then slowly started moving closer anyway. His footsteps audible through the phone. He said he just wanted to check, just to be sure. And despite the operator's warnings, he reached the door. There was a brief pause as he looked through the glass, scanning the dark backyard. And then he exhaled slightly, saying he didn't see anything, that maybe whoever it was had left. The operator began to respond, telling him to stay inside and wait for officers, but before she could finish, the man spoke again. This time his voice dropped completely. He said, "No, it didn't leave." The operator immediately asked what he meant, but there was no answer for a second. Then, very quietly, he said, "It's inside now." The operator's tone shifted instantly, telling him to get out of the house immediately, to run, not to look back. But the man didn't move right away. Instead, there was a sound, faint, behind him, a single step, inside the house. The man's breathing became rapid, uneven. As he slowly turned, the sound of his movement barely audible over the line. The operator kept calling his name, trying to get him to respond, to move, to do anything. But he didn't answer. And then, the line picked up something else. Another sound, not the man's voice, something quieter, closer, breathing, followed by a soft whisper, too distorted to understand clearly, but enough to know it was there. The call ended seconds later. Officers arrived within minutes, but when they entered the house, they found no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, nothing disturbed. The back door was still locked from the inside. The house was completely empty. And the man was gone. What made the call even more disturbing was something the operator reported afterward. Something that didn't make sense even to experienced investigators. Because in the final seconds of the call, just before it disconnected, there were two sets of footsteps heard inside the house. But only one set ever moved toward the exit. The third story comes from a late-night 911 call that, unlike the others, didn't begin with fear. It began with confusion. The call was placed by a teenage girl who sounded calm at first, almost unsure if what she was experiencing was even an emergency. As she explained to the operator that she kept receiving calls from her own phone number. The operator initially assumed it was a technical issue, something explainable, and asked her to clarify what she meant. And the girl said that over the past hour, her phone had been ringing repeatedly, and every time she checked the screen, It showed her own number calling her. She didn't answer the first few times, thinking it was a glitch, but eventually curiosity got the better of her, and she picked up. The operator asked what happened when she answered, and there was a short pause before the girl responded, her voice slightly quieter now. She said, "At first there was nothing, just silence, no static, no background noise, just complete silence." The operator reassured her, saying it could still be a phone error, but then the girl continued. She said after a few seconds, she started to hear something. Very faint, almost too quiet to notice at first. It sounded like breathing. The operator's tone shifted slightly, asking her to confirm if anyone else was in the house, and the girl said no, that she was home alone. Her parents were out, and she had been in her room the entire time. The operator asked if she could leave the house or go somewhere safe, but the girl hesitated, saying she didn't think it was serious, that it was probably just a glitch. But as she said that, her phone rang again. She told the operator she was getting another call at that exact moment. The operator asked her not to answer, but the girl paused, then said she already had. Her breathing became more noticeable over the line as she listened to the second call, and after a few seconds, she spoke again. Her voice lower now, unsettled. She said, "It's not just breathing anymore." The operator immediately asked what she could hear, and the girl didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. Slower, careful, like she was trying to understand what she was hearing. She said, "It sounds like movement, a faint sound of shifting, like fabric brushing, like someone adjusting their position." The operator told her to hang up that call immediately, but the girl didn't. Instead, she kept listening. And then, something happened that changed everything. The girl suddenly went quiet, completely silent. The operator called her name multiple times, asking what was happening, but there was no response for several seconds. Then, very softly, the girl whispered, "It's me." The operator froze for a moment, then quickly asked her what she meant, but the girl didn't answer directly. Instead, she said something else, something that made the situation feel wrong instantly. She said, "I can hear myself in the other room." A cold silence filled the call. The operator immediately told her to leave the house, to get outside as fast as possible, but the girl didn't move. She sounded frozen, her breathing uneven as she continued listening to the other call. And then, the operator heard it too, faint, in the background of the line. A second voice, identical, speaking at the same time as the girl, repeating her words, perfectly in sync. The operator raised her voice, telling her to drop the phone and run. But before the girl could respond, there was a noise, a door opening, somewhere inside the house, slow, quiet, followed by the sound of footsteps. Light, careful, moving closer. The girl's breathing turned into quiet panic as she whispered that she could hear it coming toward her room, that it sounded exactly like her own footsteps, matching the rhythm, the pace, everything. The operator kept telling her to leave, to run, but the girl didn't move. She just kept listening. And then the footsteps stopped, right outside her door. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence, and a knock, 3 times, soft, even. The girl gasped quietly, her voice shaking as she said, "It's here." The operator told her not to open the door, to stay where she was, but the girl didn't respond. Instead, there was another sound, the doorknob, slowly turning, The operator shouted for her to move, to get out of the room, but it was too late. The door creaked open, and then the line filled with silence. Not the kind of silence from before, but something deeper, heavier, like the absence of everything. The operator kept calling her name, louder now, more urgent, but there was no response. The call stayed connected for several seconds. And then, just before it ended, a voice spoke, calm, clear, identical to the girl's. It said, "She's not here anymore." Officers arrived shortly after, but when they searched the house, they found no one inside. No signs of forced entry, no disturbance. The girl's phone was found on her bed, still connected to the call log, showing one final outgoing call to her own number. And to this day, what makes that case so disturbing isn't just that she disappeared. It's that the last voice heard on that call wasn't asking for help. It was confirming that there was never just one person in that house to begin with. And the most disturbing thing about these 911 calls isn't just what was said during them. It's what those calls represent. Because when someone dials for help, they expect someone on the other end to understand, to guide them, to bring some kind of clarity to what's happening. But in all of these cases, the fear didn't come from something obvious. It came from something that didn't make sense, something that didn't follow any normal rules, a voice that shouldn't exist, footsteps that move without anyone there, something that looks or sounds exactly like you. 3 completely different situations, but all pointing toward the same unsettling idea. That sometimes the danger isn't something outside your home, it's something that already knows how to be inside it. And maybe that's what makes these calls so hard to forget. Because the people on the line weren't just scared. They were confused, trying to understand what they were experiencing in real time, trying to explain something that didn't have a clear explanation. And you can hear that shift in their voice, the moment when uncertainty turns into realization, when they understand that whatever's happening isn't normal. Because think about it, a 911 call is one of the most real things there is. It's raw, unfiltered, happening in the moment. There's no time to exaggerate or imagine. It's just someone describing exactly what they're experiencing as it unfolds. And when even those moments start to sound impossible, it changes the way you think about them. It makes you question how often things like this happen without being understood. How many calls don't get answers? How many situations don't have clear endings? And maybe the most unsettling part is this. In every one of these stories, something was present, something aware, something that didn't just appear randomly, but responded, adapted, and in some cases, imitated, not loudly, not obviously, but just enough to be noticed when it was already too late. So, the next time you hear about an emergency call, something that seems strange, something that doesn't quite make sense, remember that not every situation can be explained the way we expect, because sometimes the person asking for help isn't just dealing with a problem. They're encountering something that already understands them, something that knows how to sound like them, move like them, and exist just close enough to be real, but not close enough to be understood. And by the time anyone else realizes what's happening, the call has already ended